So welcome everyone that's joined us virtually. For those I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Laura Devoe. I'm a scientist by day, executive director of Women Who Lead also by day and sometimes by night, and then mom to Cameron, who is 2.5, and Noah, who is 3.5 months old. I feel like I need to send a little shout out to Jen Rosart, who is one of our attendees, for being the inspiration behind this session, although I'm sure it resonates with quite a few of you. She reached out and sort of got me off of my maternity leave slump, or out of my maternity leave slump, and back into the Women Who Lead circuit. So Jen, thanks for that. I won't be leading today's session. You'll have the pleasure of listening to Carolyn Steele moderate our session with 3 amazing panelists who I will let Carolyn introduce. Just a couple of reminders for those who have joined us before, and some information for those of you that haven't. We are a very diverse group, a very strong community, and so we welcome questions, comments, feedback as we go through. This is our first virtual event, so bear with us as we navigate the differences that brings versus an in-person event. The format will be, for the first hour, so until 8 o'clock, Carolyn will moderate a conversation with our 3 panelists. I will keep my eye on the chat box and do my best to respond when questions arise throughout, but otherwise I will sort of keep them in a bank and then send them Carolyn's way at around 8 p.m. so that we can do a little bit of a Q&A with the audience. We have never, at any of our events, been able to get to all of the audience questions, but that just means there's a lot more to tackle. So this will be the first of hopefully many virtual events in the future. With that being said, that's enough of you hearing from me. I'll hand the baton over to Carolyn, and the rest of the show is hers.
Thanks so much, Laura, for hosting this and for having all of us have this conversation today. I'm also moderating the entrance, so I'll do my best to do both a little bit of an introduction and then making sure people can come in as they come in. So my apologies if my eyes dart a little bit as we go through this process. So welcome to so many people who are kind of coming in. I see lots of folks from Toronto, a few people from outside of Toronto. I think I saw Western University in there, so it's nice to see some representation from across Ontario, which has afforded us through this kind of virtual platform. Now, the Women Who Lead Network is based at Women's College Hospital, which sits at the corner of College and Elizabeth Street in Toronto. And the land on which Women Who Lead was founded is the traditional land of many First Nations, including the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of Credit River. Now, more broadly in the city of Toronto is traditional land of the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, excuse me. Today, the land is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity and privilege to convene on this land. And in a webinar last week, I shared some more personal gratitude for this privilege, which I think is important to be able to work, play, and explore on this land. Whether for myself would be kind of cycling a lot through the streets along the water, running through the paths in the forests that are, span this entire area, or, enjoying the many parks with my kids, as many of you are also likely doing, especially now that our parks are open and our beaches are open and we can go out and enjoy that. And we recognize that privileges like this, to convene safely, to access training and education, and to even be able to work from home in supported environments, are not shared equally. We hope that through creating a safe space to learn from each other's experiences, we can better identify and find opportunities to address institutionalized barriers and power structures that privilege some over others, and help turn privileges into shared and accessible resources instead. And that's really kind of part of the vision of this network, is how do we share this amongst a wider group. So for today's talk, I'm so delighted to be in conversation with 3 women who are leading in healthcare in different spaces, to share with us how they've been managing their demanding and successful careers while parenting at home in very unprecedented times without much of a kind of guideline on how we're supposed to do this and do it well. So joining us, I'm going to do very brief introductions because I'd like to hear from them and have them introduce themselves as well. But from a high level, joining us today, we have Dr. Jenna Evans. She's an assistant professor at the DeGroote School of Business at McMaster University. We have Anjum Chagpar, who's the managing director in the Healthcare Human Factors Department at the University Health Network. And finally, Dr. Kate Mulligan, who is director of policy and communications at the Alliance for Healthier Communities. Now, for those of you joining us visually, it might make it a little bit easier to see who's speaking if you switch your to speaker view, and that way you'll be able to see very clearly, because we have lots of people on right now who's speaking as we go through. So I'm going to start today by asking each of our three panelists to do a bit of an introduction, but in doing so, I'd love you to tell us a bit about your professional role, but as well as your home life role. So if this were me, I would tell you I'm a scientist, but I'm also a mom of 2 kids who are 4 and 8. But then I'd also love you guys to tell us about a hobby or activity or passion that may or may not be related to those other 2 things, to your job and to your family life and the roles that you play there. So I'm going to start with Jenna, and we'll follow with Kate, and then finally with Anjum. So Jenna, tell us a bit about yourself.
Sure, thanks, Carolyn. Can everyone hear me? Yes? Okay, if my audio cuts out, please signal to me, and I'll try to get it fixed. So hi, everyone. I'm a tenure-track assistant professor of health policy and management in the DeGroote School of Business at McMaster University. I just started this job last July. I was previously a scientist at Cancer Care Ontario for 3 years. I have an almost 5-year-old daughter. Her name is Aya, and my husband works in IT for a manufacturing firm, and that is relevant to the conversation we'll have later about how we're managing at home. I don't have any hobbies, to be honest. Between the demands of work and home, I feel like I'm at my maximum capacity. I used to be heavily involved in community work, particularly through the Girl Guides of Canada, but I made a conscious decision to step away from that and from similar roles when I went back to work after having Aya. I knew that not doing so would inevitably mean dropping balls and burning out, and I can't stand not meeting the commitments that I've made. And so I knew for me that it would be better to step away with the intention of coming back to it at some point. Like many of you, my hobby these days is coming up with new ideas for how to make our 14-hour days at home together, not just bearable, but hopefully a bit fun as well. That's all for me.
Thanks so much, Jenna. And I will say that your Instagram feed is full of very good ideas on how to keep small children very excited about education in particular through these days. So next, Kate, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?
Hi, everyone. And sorry, I had to chime back in on my phone here because I lost internet. So apologies for the shaky cam. My name is Kate Mulligan. As Carolyn mentioned, I'm the Director of Policy and Communications at the Alliance for Healthier Communities. I'm also an assistant professor in the School of Public Health at University of Toronto in Social and Behavioral Health Sciences. And I sit on a couple of boards, including the board of the Toronto Board of Health and ALPHA, which is the Association of Local Public Health Agencies, as well as a small nonprofit called 880 Cities. In my home life, I'm the mother of 3 young kids. I have 5-year-old twins, Orla and Aaron, and an 8-year-old Aoife, so all girls. And during this time in the pandemic, it's my husband, Kevin, who has been their teacher and their primary caregiver from 9 to 5, while I have been plugged into the wall-to-wall Zoom meetings like many of you. One thing that in my personal life I've been able to do is when the pandemic began and I began working from home, I lost a very long commute and I gained time to pick up running again, which is something that I wasn't able to do. I just wasn't able to fit in while I was working, commuting, parenting, and all the rest. So just finished the Couch to 5K and moving on to the 10K. So that's me.
Awesome. It's amazing to hear how sometimes this is losing some hobbies, but now we're regaining others because of the shift in time. I love hearing that. Running's very close to my heart, so I love hearing when other people are running as well. And Anjum, let's hear from you a little bit, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Anjum Chagpar. I'm the managing director of a team called Healthcare Human Factors that is based at UHN. So I lead a group of designers and engineers, strategists and researchers who are looking at designing technology spaces and experiences in healthcare. I've been doing that for about 18 years. I am the solo parent, and I make that distinction between solo and single intentionally. Solo parent of a 5-year-old boy, Lake, and a 10-year-old girl, Jailene. In particular, I mean, in March and April, May, I found gardening was very therapeutic. I bought grow lights and I was planting from seeds, and then we had some construction done on our renovation done on our house, and so like cleaning up the yard and like actually raking stones was actually very, very therapeutic. But I'm finding now what is giving me energy and you know, helping me is I'm really passionate about these conversations that we're having around equity. And thank you, Carolyn, for that reflection at the beginning, because I think, you know, I'm hopeful that the voices that we're hearing now around diversity and truthfully anti-Black racism, anti-Indigenous racism are, you know, they're particularly hopeful for me. My son, although he's a biological son, he's blonde, and my daughter I adopted, and she's half Jamaican. And so on the spectrum of social privilege, I think I have children at opposite ends. I have a Black girl and a white boy. And so for me, you know, these conversations are really, really interesting and also hopeful. So for me, that's a kind of passion now.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I wonder if I can ask a little follow-up about the distinction between single and solo parenting. Can you unpack that a little bit for us, please?
Yeah, only that I think as the sole guardian, and you know, that's particularly relevant in you know, isolation mode. There is no other adult in the house or around. And you know, when there's school and when there's grandparents, you know, it's still challenging, but it's a different type of challenge. And so so yeah. Does that clarify?
It does. Thank you. Because I think we all have very, you know, different experiences in the amount of support or help or being on our own and how we define and understand that. So it's really helpful to hear that from you. So thank you for taking the time on that point. And I think all three of you in your reflection started getting at, I think, the meat of our topic today, that we had established processes to get to the points in your careers where you are while managing your kids in the environment that you have, and suddenly everything kind of explodes in a very interesting and uncertain way. So I wonder if you could talk about some of the unanticipated challenges that have come up in the last few months and how you've been adapting. And that might be whether you're doing something different personally, whether you're adapting your work processes, whether you're adapting even your parenting. And, you know, thinking through how those things have kind of changed and evolved over time. So this time, could we please start with Kate, and then we'll go to Jenna and then to Anjum. If Kate is still with us, although I think she dropped off maybe. She might be coming back. So I'm going to pick on Jenna again, and then we'll move on.
I'm here.
Oh, Kate, are you here?
I don't know why it's coming in. Really?
Oh, you're breaking up quite a bit.
Okay, I'm going to start, and if you can hear me.
Oh.
Okay, go. I'll come back to me.
Okay, let's start with Jenna, and we'll come back to Kate.
Okay. Great. So, so some of the challenges that have come up, I think, like many of you, I mean, when the announcement came out that schools were closing, I feel like there was this kind of collective panic among parents. And a lot of the challenges I think we did anticipate. For me personally, the ones I didn't anticipate were how demanding my husband's job is. I don't think I ever fully appreciated what he does because we're off in our own spaces. So I didn't realize that he is called upon to put out fires several times a day, that he's constantly being pulled into impromptu meetings, that solving a single IT issue can mean hours on the phone or cycles of trial and error. So I didn't fully anticipate just how much of the burden would be on me versus him. And related to that, I think I underestimated how long the days are and how hard it would be to get through them in a way that left everyone feeling happy and satisfied. I overestimated how much control I would have over my days and over Aya. So, like, yes, she plays independently, but rarely when I need her to. And I thought I could leave her in a virtual class and step away and get something done. But in fact, she needs me there to mute and unmute the line and keep her focused. And I come up with creative ideas for things to do with her, and I put in all this research and prep time, and then it fills up 15 minutes. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. So it's little things like that compounded over, 14-hour days, day after day after day. So I'll share some of the ways that I've adapted. So I opted out of everything that I deem non-essential to my work. And they're still important things, but they weren't absolutely essential. So pulling out of workshops and events that I had pre-registered for, not registering for anything new, no journal or grant peer reviews. I've also been really careful and kind of non-committal about new collaborations and projects, especially since we don't know what's going to happen in the fall. I've been bracing myself for things, for Aya to still be at home with me in the fall. So I'm a bit nervous about that and about saying yes to anything. But being so protective of my time has made it possible to say yes to a few things that really mean something to me. So this webinar, for example, and taking on the role of an equity facilitator at my department was another thing that I felt I needed to say yes to. Other choices I've made, I did not follow the homeschool curriculum provided by my daughter's school. I looked at it. I sometimes derived inspiration from it, but I didn't attempt to achieve what's there, and that was a huge relief. I've lowered my standards in terms of screen time, in terms of meals all being nutritious and of the house being clean. I've reduced my goals, so what I expect to achieve on a daily or weekly basis is a fraction of what it was pre-pandemic. Now, I'm lucky that I can even do that. I know for so many people, reducing their productivity is just not an option. So I recognize that privilege. One of the most powerful strategies for me, and this might seem a bit silly, but for me, it's had an impact. I have an already achieved list just above my to-do list. So every time I look at my to-do list, it's within kind of my visual arena. And it's a great reminder of what I've already achieved this academic year. And so if things are a lot slower or if I'm not hitting the mark, it just feels really good to see that I have made progress. And, we're in the middle of a pandemic and, we're all just doing the best we can. I had to redefine what productivity meant for me, because if I used my traditional definition, I'd feel like a failure every day. And the challenge I found is that with children, there's rarely tangible output to show for your efforts, right? Especially when we talk about like a daily or a weekly time frame. I mean, like it's maybe when they're really young and they're learning to talk or something, there's, you can see the progress on a daily basis, but when they're a bit older, there's not that output. And I know for some of us, especially for me, I need to see, I need something, right? I need to see something. I need to feel progress. I need to feel that I'm being productive. And so Carolyn alluded to this Instagram account that I have. And I actually started that after the pandemic. It's centered around the idea of being a working mom during a pandemic. And I post pictures of things that I do with Aya at home. And scrolling through it is really therapeutic for me. I can scroll through it and say, okay, this is productivity. And I can look at it and also use it to hold me accountable. So if I have nothing to post, maybe it's time for a new craft or a new science experiment or something. And it's interesting because it is a social media platform, but for me, it's more for myself than it is about connecting with others. So I do appreciate that my friends and family are a part of it, but it's not really for them, it's for me. I've had a few people look at my posts on Instagram and say, oh, how do you do it all? And my response is, I'm not doing it all. When I'm doing these activities with Aya, I'm foregoing my work. And my work is definitely suffering as a result. And vice versa, when I have when I have days where I have no choice but to prioritize work and not be with Aya. So something is always being neglected, and that's just the reality. And I refuse to buy into this notion of having it all. I don't believe I can have it all. I think there's only so many hours in a day, and my husband and I only have so much energy. So something's got to give, and there are going to be trade-offs, especially these days. And I accept that, and I'm trying to be forgiving. I haven't been very forgiving of my husband or of myself, but I've gotten better as the months have progressed. I'll stop there.
Thanks so much, Jenna. Lots of pieces to unpack. I did note in the chat box, I think I put the right handle on, but somebody was asking for your Instagram handle, your Professor Mommy one. So I think I may have spelled it wrong, but maybe just to plunk it in there for them. Thank you so much for starting off that conversation. I see that we do have Kate back. So Kate, feel free to pick up on what Jenna said, or answering it for yourself. What are your unanticipated challenges and how have you adapted?
Yeah, so thanks, Jenna. I think you voiced what many of us have experienced in terms of especially the logistics of just like figuring it out moment to moment. But so I think I'll shift gears a little bit and talk about what for me has been the biggest unanticipated challenge, and it's less logistical and much more emotional. So my main work is with the Alliance for Healthier Communities. And we are the network of community health centers, Aboriginal health access centers, and other comprehensive primary healthcare organizations whose mandate is to promote health equity. So we work in communities that have been made marginalized for structural reasons and policy reasons. We work with people who use drugs. We have Black-led community health centers. We have Aboriginal health access centers. We have centers that are working with migrant farm workers, for example. And that's tough work at the best of times, trying to get their needs onto the policy agenda, which is mostly what I do. And so from the very beginning of the pandemic, we were trying to make sure that the communities that we knew would be made most vulnerable would be prioritized. And seeing that not happen in real time, being on daily calls with government decision makers, raising the same question, I raised the exact same question about migrant farm workers every single day for months. It's taxing, it's hard. And we had some successes. So around the collection and use of race-based data, for example. Some really good successes. Other successes around declaring anti-Black racism a public health crisis, at least at the Toronto Board of Health level. But this it's born out of crisis. And that experience of crisis, and for me, it has been a step removed because I'm not a frontline worker. I'm not directly exposed. But I am at the front lines of this policy conversation, and many times the only person on the phone asking some of these kinds of questions. So it does make you feel a little bit crazy. Am I the only one? Maybe I'm being too, and as a woman too, am I being too strident? Am I out of line here? Am I inappropriate? Am I violating the norms of Canadian politeness right now? By raising some of these critical issues and feeling emotional about it sometimes. And so all that has been hard work. And it's also been hard because navigating that from a place of relative privilege, right? Like I'm literally doing it underneath my 8-year-old's loft bed, which is the only desk we have in our house. I'm in her bedroom, I'm safe. My kids are safe. And yet I don't feel safe because I'm in this feeling that it feels like a pandemic. It feels dangerous. And so it's confusing. It's a little bit confusing. It's a strange tension. And to feel the urgency of the need and then to see it, the wave just happen in real time. The migrant workers are hit. The refugee centers are hit, you know, and obviously long-term care is hit, and so on. And to have, it's the worst kind of I told you so. Like, nobody wants to say I told you so about something like that. So anyway, what does that have to do with parenting? Well, you know, all of a sudden having to turn that off and go and play outside, play basketball on the street for a minute. And where do you put those feelings? Where do you park that emotional load? And the way it has been working in our house is that it's my husband, Kevin, who has been doing a lot of the teaching and being with them by day, but I'm still the mom in this like heterosexual relationship, and I'm still the emotional center for my kids. And so in addition to having all that feeling in my work, at the end of the day, they've stored up all their little hurts to tell me. And so I have to absorb every boo-boo, every fight, everything that daddy didn't get right, and carry that for them too, and then navigate how much to share with them about what's going on in me, in my work, and in the world. And again, it's a privileged conversation. So when we're talking about police brutality, it's not something I've had to prepare them for. But their neighbors and friends have had to be prepared for it. And so we need to be having the same conversations about anti-racism and helping them to dismantle racist structures and so on. But it feels like a lot to take on at the end of the day when they just want to go play in the street. So I think for me, that was the biggest unanticipated challenge, is just navigating it all emotionally. And so I'm actually on vacation this week, and I took my vacation a week early because I just hit the wall. Like I just wasn't functioning as well. I'm usually fairly high functioning at work and really pushing the envelope everywhere that I could, but I just couldn't do it emotionally anymore. And it felt like a horrible time to take a break, but like, when isn't right now? And I felt like I wasn't delivering for myself, my work, my kids, anybody. And so we are all on vacation together, and I'm still kind of frazzled, as I'm sure you can see, but I knew I needed it. So that was it. And the way I'm navigating it is just trying to be as open and transparent with them as I can be, and to allow myself to bring more emotion into my work than I did before. So I'll stop there.
Thanks so much, Kate. It was getting me a bit emotional hearing that tension, that struggle. Thank you so much for opening that door for us. Anjum, please share your reflection now, please.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kate. A lot of what you said resonated with me. Definitely the biggest unanticipated challenge for me also is navigating my own emotions, but also like my children's emotions, and just trying to struggle through how best to support them, and truthfully not really knowing how to support myself, to be completely honest. All of this uncertainty, when the pandemic first hit, I think many of the people I was having conversations with felt like this was a broader reckoning, right? This was an opportunity from the universe. It was not coincidence that what we were seeing all over the world really required a pause. And some really deep insight. And so at the beginning of the pandemic, I was actually kind of hopeful. I was like, this is what we need. Of course, it's happened much earlier than I thought it would. Like, I thought we had the 11-year window before the planet blew up. And my kids, I had already started mourning like the environmental destruction that they would face in their adolescence. And so there was a mourning that I went through about the immediacy of the need to tackle these things, but then also a hopefulness because we were beginning to tackle these things earlier, and maybe this was all meant to be, and I still believe that. But the hopefulness waned very, very quickly. And I think it was just the isolation on all of our parts, and so that kind of overtook everything for me, the mental health and well-being for my children. As a single mom, as a solo parent, as I said, it's always kind of been prioritized for me. I've always centered my children in my life. But I really felt for the first time I didn't know how to parent. I always feel like that, but I mean, really deeply didn't know how to parent. So yeah, those are like definitely unanticipated challenges. And for me, like the sort of silver lining, if I have to come up with something, is to say that, you know, there is this opportunity in these moments to be mindful and thoughtful and reflective of you know, everything that we're going through right now, and then to, you know, just be in the present moment. There is that space. I do, as Jenna said, I drop everything all the time, and I drop it transparently. Like, again, I'm in a position of privilege as a leader in my team to, you know, have some agency with respect to that. So I really feel like it's important to be transparent about my struggles. And I feel privileged to be able to do that in a way that's for the most part, risk-free. Yeah. I'm going to stop. I could go on.
No, this is good. We have time. And there are a few really interesting threads that I think all of you have pulled on that before going to the more like formal question I kind of wanted to pick up on. And that's the notion of kind of capacity, right? That there is not just the time capacity that you guys are talking about in terms of what you can actually accomplish in a day, and suddenly the requirements are on, but then there's that emotional capacity that both Kate and Anjum were talking about. And you shared with us a little bit on how you create space to make more of that capacity. I wonder if you feel supported to do that, and if you weren't, what you would need. And as leaders, how do you try to create that support for others? And maybe I'll start with Anjum, because you're already on the hot seat now, and then we'll move through for that question.
Okay, I'm going to be transparent. Sorry, I missed the question, Caroline. I was distracted by this thing that my kid is flying around.
And that's perfect. That's exactly right. We're just talking about our capacity to be able to manage all these things. And I'm curious as to, you talked about being present, and I'm wondering about what other strategies to kind of create more capacity, both, you know, logistical and emotional. And then as a leader, you mentioned having a team. How do you do that for your team as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I've always tried to model for my team, which is primarily younger women than me. I'm 48, so, you know, an older mom. So yeah, the younger women on my team, I think, you know, I definitely feel a responsibility to model that empathy and flexibility and openness that I felt like, you know, I kind of always had to justify. So there's that. You know, and I think, you know, like Jen and I actually, Jen Rosart, who Laura mentioned, that there she is, in the beginning, like, you know, we have these conversations quite a bit. And so, yeah, I think as much as possible, just being open with these conversations. I'm open with the women on my team who don't have children, who are, you know, single or, you know, whatever. And I'm open with the men on my team too, and the younger men on my team, because I think it's important for everybody to understand that perspective. So I think one of the things that I'm hoping has happened is that people are feeling like they can be more authentic. I think that, you know, this whole pandemic has kind of peeled back a lot of the masks that we wear, hopefully. You know, I don't have time to integrate and manage my different personas. I am just this one person with all of this stuff, and it's you know, this is it.
Thank you. Same question to Jenna about, you shared a little bit about creating some capacity. Are you modeling that for others, and do you feel supported in doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. My answer is very similar to Anjum's in terms of the people I work with. Like, I know that on certain teams, I work with several different teams on different projects, research projects, and, you know, all it takes is one woman to be open and transparent about what she's going through, and suddenly it opens the floodgates and we all feel that it's a safe space to do so. And so I had that experience on one team with a woman who I barely knew. And I was just so grateful that she had been so open and transparent about what was going on at home and how hard things were and how she felt that she was dropping balls, because she was someone that I looked up to and who was ahead of me in her career. And I loved that. And when I saw what that did for me, I tried to make sure that I did that in my conversations with others as well on the different teams that I work with. And then also trying to ensure that I'm mindful of what others might be going through, whether they're parents or not. They might have caregiving responsibilities for other family members, and asking what's possible for them. So for example, with my research assistants and others I might be working with, I think we all need to be very flexible during this time, and I hope that employers are doing the same across the board. I'm having also the similar types of conversations with Aya, and so I think one of you mentioned it this earlier as well. If I'm having a bad day and I snap, I then have a conversation with Aya about it, and I apologize to her. Like, she apologizes to me for losing her temper, and I apologize to her for losing my temper. And it's great that we can have these kind of open conversations. And as much as I might feel that mom guilt, at the end of the day, I also feel like, wow, this was probably a really good lesson for her, seeing that mommy makes mistakes too, and mommy loses it sometimes too, and she apologizes. And I hope that that's modeling healthy behavior for her.
Thank you for that reflection. The number of times I've apologized to my children for snapping the last few months I just can't count anymore. And to Kate, similar question about finding capacity, making that room for your team, and feeling supported in doing that.
Yeah, so I have a pretty big team. I'm also the only person on our leadership team and my own team that I manage that has young kids. And so part of the preparation for the pandemic was setting some boundaries when I first started with the organization 3 years ago. They just didn't have experience with anyone who had to set those kinds of boundaries. And so I realized how firm I had to be about leaving on time to pick kids up from daycare, other kinds of things like that, my availability. And the work culture in my organization is quite extreme in terms of long hours, high expectations, constantly pushing for more. And so trying to figure out how to meet those needs. Like many of you, I became very efficient. And so that was a big part of it. So I felt well prepared, and then people knew my boundaries going in, so that was helpful. It didn't change the work though, because we were going into this pandemic crisis and we just needed everything that people could give. So it was up to me to have a sense of what I could give. In terms of with the kids, we also kind of had to relax some expectations. And one of them, especially as the days got longer, was to not worry so much about bedtime. Because otherwise with 5-year-old twins, they don't just run around the room in circles unless I'm in there with them. And I just didn't want to spend my whole entire night putting them to bed and then my older one to bed. I would never have a single second. And so we just let them, like, there was no reason for them to get up early the next day. We just let everybody stay up late. And so one of the saving graces for me has been my friend Victoria Pearson, who's on the call right now, has a similar job to mine with March of Dimes, and is my neighbor. And so after dinner every night, many of our neighbors would come out, and we were all on the same page about distancing. Everybody was respectful. The kids got it. We had the great privilege of becoming one of the Toronto's quiet streets. So our street was closed, and we just had this little community. And so at about 7 o'clock or so every night, we would just be out there. And I saw Victoria had said her husband and daughter were out there getting ice cream today. And that's what, last year we would never said yes to the ice cream truck. And I think we've probably had it like 6 times already this year. And to show to my kids, they really want me to play. And I'll say, like, I'll play a bit, but like talking with Victoria and my friends is how I play and what I need right now. And we both come out looking like Zoom zombies, like we're just frazzled, our eyes look huge, and we can't switch emotionally, but we've got each other and some of other neighbors, and just can be outside in nature for a minute. Like by nature, I mean like our front yards, but like we're, you know, I don't know, just being in a community. And so anyone who knows my work, a lot of my work is about social prescribing and how vital it is for us to connect with other people in community. And to do things like exercise together, socialize together, eat together. And we're all missing that. And we're all able to cope in various ways, but it's not sustainable over the long term. And so we found ways to do this safely and well. And so that's the way that I've been able to create some space, still be around my kids, still play, but not have to be glued to each other, which is what they prefer the second I'm done work. So that's how I'm doing it so far.
I really appreciate not just your reflections on how you're able to kind of create the space for yourselves and then kind of that amount of self-reflexivity and what's needed, but how you're thinking about doing that for the people around you and how that looks so different when the people around you might have a shared experience of parenting and however that looks, or a very different experience where not a lot of people have small kids, which is an experience I share with you, Kate, in my small office. I'm among the few with small children at home. And it changes the way you approach it, but you're all creating space for yourselves the way you need to, which I appreciate you guys sharing that reflection. Now, as you guys are speaking through this, it's apparent that you play so many different roles. And, you know, Jenna, earlier you said, you know, you have to pick. You have to pick one or the other. And Anjum, earlier you also said you're all of those things at once. And I wonder, in the juggling of these new things and the new definitions of things like productivity and parenting that are happening in the last few months, how has that maybe challenged some of your roles or even your sense of identity in the last few months? And how are you kind of grappling with that? That's one I've talked to other parents about, both men and women, who feel like they don't even know themselves anymore. And I'm wondering if that's something you share or something you reflect on, and how you've been addressing that. And for this one, we'll go to Jenna first.
Yeah, great question. It's a weird position to be in, because a part of me is convinced and enraged that we are falling into traditional kind of gender role traps. But then there's another part of me that says, no, we're not. It's just the nature of our jobs are different, and this is how it plays out. And so I don't know where the truth lies, maybe a little bit of both. So it's been hard. I feel like sometimes we're mastering the tag team parenting. We just kind of hand off the baton. And sometimes it's at our scheduled time where we're supposed to hand off. So technically he takes mornings, I take afternoons. Does it always play out that way? Hell no, but we try. Sometimes I feel like I'm losing it, and I'll just say, you know, if you're not in a meeting right now, can you I just need to step away for a bit. And, you know, so it's the tag team parenting, sometimes tug of war. In some ways, I feel like we've bonded more as a family than ever before. But in other ways, I feel like our marriage has been sorely tested. We've definitely kind of been at each other quite a bit. And so really a cocktail of experiences and emotions. But the identity piece, for me, it's the whole gender role thing. I just can't help but feel we're falling into those traps. And so I just feel like I've got my claws out and I'm like ready to attack, even though that may not even be the case. And so I've been working on that, because, you know, the nature of our jobs is so different. I have so much more flexibility. And so it is what it is. But we are trying to listen to one another and be responsive to one another. Sometimes it takes a blowout fight to get there, but we do get there. So I'll stop there.
Thanks so much, Jenna. Anjum, I'm curious about your experience, which is likely different as a solo parent, and how, as you said before, you're all those things at once, and how you're navigating that now.
Yeah, and so in some ways, I feel like the change isn't that dramatic for me, because I've always kind of had to sort of, again, center my kids. And I speak about that at work. I've always felt like, you know, I should be speaking about that at work. And so it's not really, it's not really a huge shift for me. And I think, you know, what's kind of been wonderful is that my team knows that perspective. And so they do check in with me, and they do kind of, you know, appreciate the challenge. You know, I think everybody is challenged. And so they are, you know, sort of reflective enough to kind of, and kind enough to sort of check in and give me some more space, which is great, and pick up my slack. And there is slack for sure. And so that's kind of been nice. And I you know, I am kind of, again, very grateful that I've had the privilege to be transparent about being a single mom, a solo mom. So that's been helpful as this transition to, you know, homeschooling and everything else has happened. Other than that, you know, I think one of the things that's happened in our household around identity is this, the identity beyond being a mom, right? Like, I am everything to my children now. I am their teacher, their grandparents, their friend. I am everything. And so that's been actually really interesting and kind of, you know, exciting in some ways to kind of redefine my identity for my children. I mean, of course, my primary role is as a mother, but I am playing these other roles. And so, like, navigating that interplay and that relationship, and, you know, in some ways, you know, bringing myself down to a level playing field with my children, it's challenging, but it's also, I think, in many ways humbling. And I feel like I need to be humbled by them, like reminded of their sort of inherent wisdom. And not to say that that's always, you know, always the case, but of course, you know, there are many things that I'm learning from my children. My children are incredibly wise. And so I am enjoying that stretching of the relationship. It's challenging for sure. There's a lot of tears, and I'll you know, admittedly, am embarrassed to admit it, a lot of screaming, but also, yeah, a lot of really kind of beautiful moments. So
thanks so much for that. I never kind of thought of it that way, that you're now more identities for your kids as opposed to just digging deep into the mothering identity. I hadn't kind of considered that perspective on it, so I really appreciate that reflection. I'm going to think on that one a little bit over the next few days. Kate, now to you. Same question about changing identities and roles over the last few months.
Yeah, for me, it hasn't felt like a change in terms of identities and roles. Like I've been balancing a number of different kinds of professional hats for a while. One of the challenges, though, has been the politics of this whole pandemic and when to step up and when not to. So I grew up in a rural, small town, Ontario, in a Catholic environment that was very restrictive toward women. And so one thing that I tell my younger women on my team is take up space, because that's something that's hard for me to do. And I've had to learn that there's value to the world in hearing my voice and my contributions. And so I want them to know to take up space and to not spend as long as I did worrying, like, you know, fighting against the all the cultural reasons why I was told not to. And yet I'm in this space now as a leader, a white-skinned leader in an equity organization with a diverse team with many different kinds of experiences and expertise and contributions, that I'm constantly navigating the when and whether and how to take up space, how to support other people to take up space, when it's appropriate for me to be the one taking up space. You know, sometimes, you know, I've been elbows out to carve out the space for people. So, for example, the Ontario Bioethics table initially didn't have any Black or Indigenous voices on it. And so I elbowed my way into there and then left, right? Like created some spaces, made sure that we could organize, and then other people with the right expertise could step forward. Sometimes we're organized enough to do that, sometimes we're not. It's hard to know what the right thing to do is. And so I think that in terms of identities, that's been one of my struggles right now is where does my voice fit when on the one hand I'm told to take less space as a woman. But on the other hand, I'm taking up more space than I should in other conversations and in other spaces. And some people, you know, so I think all of that conversation, many of us are struggling with it right now in trying to create more inclusive places that are truly transformative for people. And the exciting and strange part about the pandemic is the opening up of these policy windows and other opportunities that I might never have dreamed possible before. And so suddenly, some of my like government relations savvy doesn't really mean anything, because we could do something way bigger than whatever we thought we might have been able to do with this government, for example. And so something new can emerge, like defunding police conversations that we never thought could have been part of our discourse. But again, it's sort of like navigating leadership, I guess, is new and tricky, and really involves lots and lots and lots of conversations and advice from lots of people. And that's the best way to make policy and do the work, is being community informed, being practice informed, and so on. But you know what? Those people whose voices need to be there are also exhausted and stressed and very much at risk during COVID. And so how much can we rely on their contributions right now either? So it's a messy and complicated and really hard to do from under your 8-year-old's loft bed. Not in dialogue, not in person, not where we can kind of be in the same room and get on the same kind of biorhythm. None of that's happening. And so it's all figured out over Zoom, and it's very difficult, emotional, hard conversations that are important and hard, but really weird to do online. And it's all just feels very strange after a while, and both real and unreal somehow. And so like plugging into the matrix and then disconnecting, all of that part is the part that I think struggling with more, and trying to support the mental health and well-being of my staff, who are some of them in much more either mentally or physically risky situations than I am. And so even though I'm dealing with all this stuff, there are many people dealing with more or different. And so really trying to be there for them in a high pressure work environment where their own mental health is at risk, just thinking about the work that they're doing. It's a lot to take on. So doing our best through all that is why I'm on holiday right now.
You know, it strikes me in like all the responses to the question so far, and from all three of you, although it's coming from kind of different spaces and different experiences, there's the common theme of tension, right? There's opportunity, but then there's exhaustion and lack of capacity. There's taking on new identities, but potentially falling into old gender roles. There is excitement at the crumbling of policy windows, but then existing within our old structures. So I wonder, just before we open it up to the broader group to ask their questions of you, I wonder how, gosh, I'm kind of coming up with this question as I'm talking about it. I just wonder about navigating those tensions. Like, is it clear to you that it's happening, or you kind of have to sit down and like, well, I actually have to decide between this and this, and how do you decide to alleviate that tension? How do you land on a side just to give you that breathing room? I know I'm not sure I articulated that as well as I could have, but hopefully you get the gist of it. And I'll come back up to Anjum to answer that maybe poorly worded question. Oh, you're still muted.
Sorry, Caroline. I don't know if I am going to be able to answer that question. I mean, the tensions, you know, I don't know. I don't know that I have the answer. Can I listen to other people's answers and then maybe reflect on those?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can all reflect on this. I mean, I'm not even sure. And I asked the question. Jenna, any thoughts?
Yeah, so navigating the tensions between kind of the different roles and the different demands, I guess, on our time and on our energy. Oh, I don't know. I feel like sometimes I'm in control of that decision, and I'll make an explicit decision on how that time is going to be spent. And other times that decision happens by default. It's made for me based on meetings or deadlines or what have you. But I do remember a portion of time where I let work fully take over. So not just when I had to let it take over because of, you know, these external demands, but, you know, I just wanted to push through something, or I was in the right headspace for something, or I don't know, I just really enjoy my work. So I just love working on it, right? Like many of us do. And I don't know, I felt I did not feel good at the end of the day on those days. And I try to remember that feeling, and oh, I'm getting emotional now. I'll need a minute.
Jenna, I fully understand that feeling, right? I think what I've heard from all three of you, and I've heard from other women in the network and that I'm privileged to be friends with, is the constant demand to be great at all of the different things. And we so often have to just make choices. And you might feel awesome about finishing that paper, finishing that piece of work, but then you look at your kids and you think, I haven't seen you all day. And the same thing, you spend an awesome time with them all day, you work out their homeschool and you do it all, and then you go to your computer and you think, I have 20 things I didn't do today. And it's so hard to kind of navigate that. And you know, I feel like I've asked like an impossible question. And with that, I'm going to ask it to Kate, and how you address that kind of challenge.
Well, I think my first instinct is to say yes to everything. And so I highly recommend that you don't follow that strategy. You know, nobody can do everything. It's impossible. Maybe you can have it all, but not all at once. And I think it was almost exhilarating at the beginning to be part of a big thing that we were all going through. And to have something to say and have someone ask you what you thought about it. And I feel horrible about that in a bunch of ways, but at the beginning, it was just part of the adrenaline. When I was the first working from home that first week, I was diagnosed with pneumonia, and I was afraid that I had COVID, and I wasn't tested because at that time they were only testing people with, you know, I didn't meet the criteria for some reason. I have asthma and I had pneumonia, and I was on some medication that was just making me feel hyped up. And in addition to the hype of just everything moving to online and all that zaniness. And I think I tried to recreate that energy for a long time after. Once I was fine and just working, I still felt that emergency feeling. And so I think it's taken a long time to kind of come out of that. I think I still feel it. I think I still feel like it's an emergency. And it's confusing. And as you mentioned, Carolyn, it's a tension because my daily life is like the opposite of an emergency. It's like everybody has slowed down their routines. The kids are pretty happy. Like they have some mental health challenges, I think, being home, being isolated and away from school and worried about the pandemic or other things. But in general, my physical environment is the opposite of an emergency. And my work environment is a complete emergency. And so just my body doesn't know what to do about that. And, so I finally just kind of hit the wall where I was like, I can't keep this up, but I've created this pattern for myself. I don't really know how to change. And hi, you're sorry? Okay. Okay, you heard me from upstairs. Okay. So yeah, so this is Erin. She's 5. So I forget where my head was, but that's kind of how it goes. So yeah, so I just, I knew I must have needed a holiday when everyone on my staff was like, good for you. Please do take the time away. You're setting an example for others and whatever, stuff like that to make me feel better about it. Yeah, so I don't know. I'm sitting with the tension. I'm being as open and vulnerable as I can be, I think, with my staff and team. And I think one of the biggest challenges for me was, like for them, it was hard for them that I was home but not available. And there was a big part of me that was like resisting them emotionally or intellectually or whatever, so that I could focus on my work. I had to just push them away, and I couldn't just turn it off at the end of the day. So I think that was one of the hard things, is, you know, going downstairs at the end of the day and still feeling like I was resisting them in some way, and just really not liking that feeling, but not knowing how to change. And so part of being on vacation together is for me to turn off the phone, like entirely, get off Twitter, not worry about crises that emerge at work, like by turning it off, because if I see it, I'll get into that feeling of emergency again. And so just, yeah, to just really, really, really disconnect from the matrix that I've been plugged into for the last several months, so that I can take away the worst part, which is that feeling of, why am I resisting them when when they're my kids and I love them, and I don't want to have that feeling. So that's what I'm working on right now.
It's I really appreciate all three of you kind of sharing very openly the challenge, because I think a lot of us are sharing it. And you know, I try really hard to be a robot, but I'm getting a little emotional myself. I see, you know, we're at 8, and I do encourage people who are listening and thinking, if they have questions for our panel, I'll be taking a look at the chat box. But what I've seen come through from Laura is kind of a reflection that, you know, the tensions are creating kind of a sense of disorientation, right? That we're kind of, and Kate, I totally know what you mean. There's this like sense of emergency and panic, and yet you're hanging out in a backyard and your kids are just like wandering, and like, you know, you're not like rushing to get to a place. It's a different kind of feeling. So in that, you know, disorientation, is there something that you guys each do to ground yourselves again? And that might be work, kid, physical activity, anything kind of related. What grounding activities are you doing? And I'll jump to Anjum for that question to start.
Yeah, so I think grounding for me is like being on the ground. So I really do firmly believe in like connection with nature, however, in any form. So I talked about my gardening, walking barefoot on the ground. So yeah, taking grounding very literally. I also have started to write more. I used to write a lot of poetry when I was younger. And, you know, the pandemic is a great topic, all of these emotions for poetry. So, you know, maybe similar to the Instagram thing, it's nice to kind of, I don't share it, but it's nice to go back and reflect on the early days of the pandemic and what I was writing about. I enjoy that. I enjoy seeing like how my thoughts have evolved or how my emotions have changed. And that for me is also grounding, you know, to see that in the passing, with the passing of time, you know, many things have changed and shifted for me in ways that I'm kind of proud of. And also in ways that make me feel more secure. Like I know that in many ways, like everything will be okay, even if things are not okay, you know, so that's been grounding.
And Jenna, what's been grounding for you?
So we've been going on hikes a lot more often than we ever used to, because it's about the only thing you can do nowadays. And I pretend like it's for Aya, but it's really for me. So I've been really enjoying kind of exploring all of the provincial parks. I had no idea that we had so many, so close to where I live in Mississauga. So that's been really fun. So like Anjum, connecting with nature in that way. The other thing for me is, you know, when she's gone to sleep, that's my time. So I really look forward to that time. We just kind of sit, have some herbal tea and watch Modern Family. And, you know, for me, that's my time to relax. I do often work at night as well, just to kind of catch up. But I almost always make sure I have an episode of Modern Family first with my husband, because that's our time to kind of connect at the end of the day and just kind of relax and laugh before we get back to it if we need to. I wish there was more. I wish I could say that I was doing more, but I'm not at this point. I wish I was working out or doing something else, but I just haven't gotten there yet.
I think any degree is a win at this stage. And Kate, to you, I know you're just starting off on a vacation, but even before then, what were your grounding techniques?
So I took up running again after a long time. The one thing I could never fit in, even though I knew it was important, was self-care. Like I just couldn't do it with the long commute and the job and the kids and everything else. Like I was leaving the house at 7 a.m., not getting back till 6, parenting, putting kids to bed, all this stuff. I just couldn't figure it out no matter how hard I tried. So losing the commute gave me just that little bit of extra time to pick up running again. And so it was like not easy or fun at the beginning, but it has been incredible for mostly my mental health. I know it's good for physical health, but it's a way for me to be in nature, be alone. I'm like, believe it or not, I'm an introvert, and it's been pretty hard to not ever be alone during this time. I'm either on Zoom or with someone else. So I have this dedicated time, and it took a few weeks for that to be okay with the kids and the routine, that they would let me leave the house and it was all fine. But now it's an established part of the routine. They don't even blink. They know that, and I say to them, like, the reason I'm doing this is because it helps me to be a better mom. I come back happier, I'm healthier, I'm stronger, like all those things that we kind of know intellectually. Like I'm experiencing them in real time, because sometimes I go out and I'm super stressed. And I come back and I just feel like a totally different human being. And so it has been really incredible for me, and that's something I'm actually a bit nervous about if I have to get back to the commute, about losing it, because I feel like it's absolutely vital to my survival right now. And I remember that from other times in my life that were stressful, that I also needed to have exercise and time in nature to keep me going. And so I'm a bit nervous about how to keep it up, but for the time being, it's amazing.
As I said at the beginning, that is an activity very close to my heart, although I do several of them, but I fully understand, and I share that concern that, you know, some loss of time going back to work might actually upend some of the grounding things that we've been doing, going on hikes, running, being out in the garden and doing the gardening that you're talking about, Anjum, that you know, there is a little bit more space and time for us to kind of use those techniques. So then you kind of, if you lose that, it can feel jarring. So I do encourage folks to ask some questions in the chat box. What I have been seeing in the chat box are some wonderful reflections from people, and then just people supporting each other as they go through the reflections. So it's just such a nice thing to see, and lots of wonderful things to say to our panelists if you've had a chance to take a look. So I do encourage any additional questions coming in here. Sorry, I'm reading as we're talking, so I'm talking a little bit. Some people are sharing about books, and here we have another question that's coming in. And this is a wonderful one coming in from Laura. What grace are you granting to other women that you really need to grant to yourself as well? It's like a conversation Laura and I talk about a lot, that we offer a lot to other people and we give them lots of space and leeway that we just don't give to ourselves. And let's start with Jenna this time.
Sure, yeah. I think that's always been a struggle for me. So yeah, I mean, I probably could spend more time on self-care and just, you know, put it on the calendar, but again, it's the trade-offs. It's like, what are you willing to trade off to put that in, and how much value do you ascribe to it? So I'm just not a sporty person. I don't enjoy exercising. So for me, that's a tough one. Like, I would rather work. I really would. So I need to find something that I'm just so excited to do. And I need to convince myself that it's important enough to put other things aside for. And I haven't figured out what that is yet. Modern Family doesn't cut it. That's a nice, you know, half-hour break with some tea, but I do definitely need to do more for myself.
Thanks, Jenna. And Oh, you're muted again.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, no, that question I've seen, variants of that question before, the fact that we are often kinder to other people than we are to ourselves. And so for me, I think what comes up every time I hear that is to really kind of honor that I am enough, right? I say that to my friends all the time. You're doing so much and you're doing so great. I say that to my daughter. You're doing it. You're doing it. You're doing amazing. I never say that to myself. And so like really kind of internalizing that and believing it, because it's true. It is true. But I think, yeah, there's, a socialization and we always have to do more and be better. So, but yeah, we are enough. I am enough.
And thank you. And Kate.
I'm not sure that I have a lot to add. Like, I think that I've arrived at a good place of like self-compassion, and I've always been kind of a good enougher. So I think that, trying to be perfect at a lot of things is like counterproductive, right? So I think that part's been okay. But I do have some wishes, and maybe I'm hoping that other people around this call will be able to help me with. One is like, I wish I could read again. I find it really hard at the end of the day, or to really read or think, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. And I find that even I'm a little bit envious of my younger staff at times, where it'll be like, okay, Black Lives Matter movement is on, and over the weekend we all read Angela Davis and W.B. Du Bois, and off we're, I did not do that. Okay, like I played in the swimming pool, like the inflatable pool for 6 hours. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't do that. I did not do that kind of cultural self-reflection and thinking. And it's a luxury that I don't seem to have, but I feel it's important. So that's one that I can't figure out. And then the other one that I'm not beating myself up too much about, but I wish I could do more about is connecting with my friends. Lots of other isolated women in the same circumstances, going through stuff, who, for me, a lot of like my university friends, for example, who don't live close by, but we keep in touch. I haven't been, I don't have anything left in me to be a good supportive friend right now. So those are the two things I wish I could figure out how to do, that I feel like I might be missing. But I'm not too fussed about it, because I can only do so much.
So a wonderful question has come in from Carly McPherson, and Kate, to your point, Laura suggested audiobooks. That's almost the only way I can take in books. You can listen while you run, or I listen while I'm on a bike trainer. You can suck in a lot of information while you're out for a while. But Carly McPherson is asking about some practical examples about how you escape with your families, with your kids day to day. We had some examples from Jenna going out on hikes, or going to parks. What other activities are you doing to kind of break it up, regenerate, specifically with your family? And this time I'm actually going to come back to Kate, because I haven't had you start in a little while, and then we'll go back up.
The main thing has been just getting out in nature. So trying to do some hikes and things. Actually, the first time we live not far from some Don Valley trails. And the first time we got in the car to drive to where that was, it was very strange, because the kids hadn't been in the car for a really long time, and they all found it very weird to be driving. In their minds, in their short lives, it's a really, really long chunk of their lives. So that was kind of hilarious, but they've really, really enjoyed it and thrived on being in nature. So I think that's probably the main thing that we've done. We also have like a trailer bike, so that my husband's bike has 2 seats behind it, like not a trailer, but like an additional, it's like a 3-person bicycle. So we have that, and the older one rides her bike. So we're trying to get out on bike rides. And letting the older one roam a bit took a bit of faith, a leap of faith, like finding a trusted other family that was doing distancing in a way that worked for us and for them. Because she did have some friends who weren't. It was really, really hard for her, that we had to just kind of say, like, that's not happening right now. You guys aren't hanging out right now, because they're not, they're not doing the physical distancing. But allowing her to roam a little bit has helped with her need to get out and do things. But other than that's it. Like, otherwise we are kind of on a home routine. But it's been okay, I think. And we just say to them when they get bored that that's when their best ideas are going to happen. And we know that's true from our own childhoods. And I actually love it. Like, I actually love that they've been able to slow down and play in an unstructured, not led by parents or adults kind of way. And it took some time for that to really emerge in them. And it's not always that fun because they fight all the time, like all the time. But that's learning too. Like, they're learning how to get along and figure out their own fights and be sisters and do all that stuff. So like, I'm kind of okay with them being bored because I think it's actually really healthy for them.
I love that that kind of cognitive trick of being bored actually sparks your best ideas. My husband likes to remind me that when he was 5, he was allowed to just bike wherever. He broke his arm, but he was just allowed to bike wherever. And so when our 8-year-old similarly wants some freedom, he reminds me of that. And that's a nice reflection, helpful. Jenna, anything in addition to hiking that you guys have been going in?
Yeah, we've been spending more time in our backyard. Our backyard is something that we've often complained about. We have, we live in a condo townhouse, so we don't actually have a private backyard. It's like shared. We have a bit of a fencing, but you know, with a 4.5-year-old, 5-year-old, I mean, she doesn't, you know, respect other people's privacy. So she's off in other people's backyards, and it's something that we've complained about for years. And now we're just, you know, saying, you know, we're so grateful that we have this outdoor green space now. So we have been out in the backyard a lot more often than we ever have before. And like I said, we're doing a lot more crafts at home. And again, you know, it may look on the surface like it's for Aya, but it's for me too. I think I alluded earlier to like this need to like produce something tangible. And crafts are great. You know, you're producing something tangible. So I think I enjoy it actually more than Aya does sometimes. She really likes the free role play. So, you know, you be so-and-so from this cartoon and, you know, I'll be someone else. And it's fun for a bit, but she's, you know, well, you're doing it wrong, mommy. And no, not like that. That's not how it works. And so, yeah, the crafts are actually for me more so than for her. So we built a car out of like an Amazon box and things like that. So I think the crafts and puzzles and games at home have helped to ground us and bring us together as a family. We're not really into video games, but probably about 7-8 years ago, my husband won an Xbox at work, and it's been collecting dust in the basement for all these years because we don't care to play. But yeah, with the pandemic, we're desperate for anything. So we took it out and dusted it off, and you know, there's like this dance game. So we've all been kind of dancing to that now and then. So, you know, just trying to be more creative, looking around the house for things that we can take advantage of. Today, Aya found an old chess, you know, a chess board out in the basement. And I thought, oh, well, now we can learn a little bit about chess and maybe I can teach her what they do. So it's, you know, just taking whatever comes up along the way and trying to turn it into a learning opportunity.
Thanks, Jenna. Now, the Chess Institute of Canada has lots of resources on how to help your kids learn. So my son does that with the school, but they have lots of online stuff too. So if you're keen, you can look them up online if she's interested. Anjum, I'm curious if you're taking your kids into your garden with you. Are they gardening, or what other activities are you guys doing?
Yeah, I mean, I was hoping that they would be in there with me too, and it lasted for one day. Now that we're getting some strawberries, some wild strawberries, and some peas and beans, so they're kind of coming back out there. But yeah, nature, and I think, you know, one of the things that's kind of, you know, helpful about being a single parent is that you can't watch your kids all the time. So my children are incredibly independent, and I love the idea that they do at 5 years old, they ride around the block. And it's a small block, but they do that. And I love that they have that independence and that sense of control over their environment. I think that's really healthy. A couple other things that we're doing is really fun is that I watch a lot of cooking shows and cooking videos. And Jamie Oliver's son, Buddy Oliver, is similar in age to my son. And so my son is addicted to watching these, but what's super cute is that now when he cooks, and he cooks independently, he will like pretend he's like shooting a video, like a cooking video. It's really good. And then on that same note, my daughter, she really is interested in acting in modeling, unfortunately. Well, anyways, so she's been asking about like auditions and finding auditions for her. And there is like this Real People casting site, and they always post interesting opportunities to audition. And now that we're at home, we do these little audition reels. We haven't got any callbacks, but just the opportunity to, as a family, act out, like we're given direction, we're given what to do for the audition. It's kind of fun. And now we have like a series of little videos, you know, Blake doing his lines and Jilene doing their lines. It's kind of fun. It's like improv, but with a little bit more of a purpose.
Awesome. I love these practical examples. They're really fun. I'm going to try actually a number of them with my kids. We have just a few minutes left, and I would love to get to this one last question from Victoria Pearson. And she's asking what each of you are most proud of in the last few months. Like what just like makes you feel amazing. And we're going to start with Jenna.
Most proud of that I'm still here, that I've survived this far. I've survived it this far. I think I'm most proud of the fact that I guess we found a rhythm that works for us. And, you know, there were kind of some bumps along the road, and, you know, I can relate to some of what Kate mentioned earlier with the emotions. I think for me, those first couple of weeks were just like, I was glued to the news, and I did not like that feeling. I was just checking numbers obsessively, and it was not good. And, you know, I feel like over time we've gotten into a rhythm. I think that will be tested the longer this goes on, and we'll probably come in and out of, you know, kind of finding our place within the pandemic. But I'm proud that we've survived this far, and, you know, that I'm still making progress. I'm still here for my students. I'm still showing up for my students, and my research is still moving along inch by inch, you know, months behind where I thought I would be. But as long as as long as I'm making baby steps towards those goals, I feel good about it.
Thank you. And Kate?
I don't know. I think I'm not right into the headspace yet to evaluate how it's all been, because I kind of just burnt out. But I think, you know, hopefully there will be some policy change as a result of the hard work that we put in, and also a feeling of solidarity that, you know, to be sort of sometimes the lonely voice out there, but then to be joined by lots of people is kind of nice. And so I'm proud of that. I'm proud of stepping back and just trusting that other people can do this, and getting over my own ego that somehow it has to be me. It doesn't. And I know that intellectually, but it's hard. You get swept up in it at times. So stepping back and not comparing myself to others I wouldn't say I'm doing great at it, but I'm doing better. And because I recognize that it's, again, important to my well-being and survival. So those are some of the things I'm proud of. And there's one other little thing that I want to put a plug in for, just because it's kind of adorable. I've been part of this health journalism fellowship at U of T over the last year. And with my fellow students, we put together a little radio program, and it's about COVID and other pandemics and their impact and so on. So it'll be coming out in a few weeks, and it's something that, and I did a short interview with Jennifer Bonnell, who's a historian, an environmental historian at York University, all about prior pandemics like cholera and typhoid and the relationship with nature and the Don River and what that means, you know, what it might imply about our own experience right now. And it actually turned out really well. So I'm proud of it. And it's going to be on CIUT, the U of T radio station, in a few weeks. So Laura, maybe I'll send you the link when it's available so people can have a listen to it.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Kate. And for our last thought, Anjum.
Well, I guess, you know, I am kind of proud about taking the opportunity to think more deeply about our future, our collective futures, the future of our children, the education system, the health system, all of these systems under which we operate, and really kind of like feel some agency and opportunity now to to talk about changes, to kind of get together at the ground level. So of course there are policy challenges, but like to feel now like we can create critical mass. I mean, one of the conversations that I'm having with my neighbors is all around September and schooling, and coming up with some really kind of innovative and really ground up approaches. And so I'm really proud of the fact that you know, that I've kind of stepped up in my mind, at least, to imagine things differently, and to not just imagine, but to talk about those things, and then not just talk about those things, but like bring people together around these ideas. And then, like, you know, in the summer, we're going to try to do like this little co-op bubble homeschool eco school kind of experiment to see if we can create an adjunct to whatever is going to happen in September. But you know, like, I'm proud of my community. I'm proud that people are open to these ideas, and I'm grateful for this space.
Thank you so much. And I want to take just a moment to thank all three of you for sharing so openly and authentically your experiences. I know it's so difficult on so many levels. And I know myself, and from looking at all of the comments, are so grateful for your time and your energy today. So I wonder if I'll just give it back to Laura for our final thought before we're wrapping up.
Thanks, Carolyn. I just, for those of you who weren't aware of it, put our website in the chat box. We have recordings of all of our past events on there. If you just are having a moment where you need to feel this connection again, and there isn't this kind of event, it's the closest you'll get. The conversations are equally authentic. And we've sort of, you know, some of the things I'm reading in the comments now, we've heard after all of our in-person events that, you know, people will say, I laughed, I cried, you know, it was exactly what I needed to hear. And there's, you know, we try our best to curate as much diversity as we can on a panel. We always have, you know, we're not quite at the bar we want to be at. And on that note, we welcome from anyone that's participating suggestions for Black women, Indigenous women, you know, LGBTQ plus, like literally everyone and anyone, but explicitly those underrepresented groups. I find that often when I turn to my network, I get a laundry list of brilliant white women, and I can just get enough recommendations that I'm constantly expending my energy trying to find the brilliant women that represent those communities that we don't often see. So my asks to this group are to please sort of nominate those women or send them our way so that we can give them a platform and a voice. And related to that, if there are ideas anyone has for conversations or topics that we can cover in the upcoming months, we're here to give everyone a community to connect to and give us all, I think, the especially right now, the emotional outlet that we all clearly need. I feel like, you know, I think all of us at one point were either trying to hold back tears or letting them slowly fall down our face, because so many things that I had not identified that I was experiencing were very articulately laid out by our panelists today. So Anjum, Kate, and Jenna, and Carolyn as well, thank you so much for giving a voice to all of the other women on this call, and kind of holding this space for all of us to recognize the strength and resilience that that I would say we've all been demonstrating, but haven't realized, haven't been able to realize that in ourselves, but realizing it in everyone else is sort of encouraging me to try to grant myself the same grace that I'm granting everyone else. So that being said, everyone can either go enjoy their kiddos or go enjoy their alone time, depending on the state of your households. And hopefully we will be able to connect with all of you again soon. But thank you so much for taking the time to join us tonight. Bye, everybody.
Hi, good job. Thanks, everybody.
Have a wonderful night, ladies.
Take care.
Bye.